Qigong and Psychosis. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Qi Life. So in general, Qigong is really safe. I did write an article a little while ago about the dangers in Qigong, and so I'll put a link to that below in the description below because you might be interested in that. Because while Qigong is in general really safe, and in that article I talk about just how safe it is, there are a few things to be aware of. Anything, and what I talk about in that article is you can compare Qigong in many ways to like going for a walk. For the most part, it's really safe. It's a good thing to do. Most of the time people don't need to take too many precautions about going for a walk, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some things that could happen that could cause some harm or injury, and it's helpful to be aware of them. And so that's a good article to maybe check out if you're interested in that. Interestingly, within this, while Qigong is really safe, very few contraindications or general contraindications. One of the main contraindications for Qigong practice is for people with psychosis. And even then, it's not a blanket, you can't do it at all. Qigong can be really helpful for people with psychosis, but it's something where there needs to be a lot of extra care around. There are a few other things where there's sort of some kind of general contraindications, but they're not so general. Like there's some things like when someone's pregnant or when they have really high blood pressure. And it's not that they shouldn't do any type of Qigong practice, it's more that some might need modification or they should avoid that, some that are too intense and so on. With psychosis, it's quite a general caution across all types of Qigong practice that there needs to be extra caution if someone has psychosis. And there are some really good reasons for this. Unfortunately, I've been around the world of Qigong for quite some time. I've had very broad exposure, met many different people, both teachers and students and enthusiasts, and who've approached Qigong in different ways. And within that, I have come across a very few cases of people who they have had some bad effects from practicing Qigong when they had a condition of psychosis. And so I know, I've seen the downside of this, where it's like, there's a reason for this contraindication, there's a reason for this extra caution. But as I said, it doesn't mean that it's a blanket, you can't do it all. It means there needs to be extra caution. So I'll talk a little bit about why there needs to be that extra caution when someone has psychosis around Qigong, and then about what some of that extra caution should look like. So there's a couple of main reasons why there needs to be this extra caution. And I'll talk about, so super simple one first. So someone who has psychosis will often have some type of delusional thinking going on, delusional perception of the world around them. And within Qigong practice, often we tune into some things that they're completely natural, they are completely normal. It's just that most of the time we're not aware of them, we're not paying attention to them. And so some of this can be some interesting, what seem at first like unusual sensations in our body as we become aware of our energy and so on. And if someone has some delusional thinking patterns going on, that can then feed into their delusions and become another layer and send them off on new tangents away from being grounded in what's really going on around them. And again, it's not that the sensation itself is wrong or unnatural, but it just feeds into an already distorted way of thinking. And that's not helpful. Another, and I guess in many ways it's kind of the same thing actually, but another way to think about it is about what's actually going on within the energy in the body and the energy in the brain. Because everything in our body is functioning on the flow of energy. Our muscles are working on this, our organs are working on this. Our brain is working on energy flowing through it. And when someone has psychosis, some of that energy is not flowing where it we could say should, maybe should is too strong of a word, but it's not flowing in a harmonious, connected to reality way, right? So some of it is, instead of going over here, it's like heading off over here, or maybe it's heading off here and here, and yeah. And so they've got a pattern that's already set up that's not so helpful. Now, of course, the process of Qigong is to balance our energy flow out, to make it healthy, to make it harmonious. And this is why it can be really helpful for people with psychosis to actually start to work with their energy, and instead of some of this energy that's flowing off over here, help to guide it back into flowing in a more harmonious way. It can be really useful for that. The problem with that is, and the caution that needs to be exercised, is if you're not guiding that energy effectively and you're simply pouring more energy in, it's a little bit like pouring energy, okay, water is a great analogy for how energy flows in our body often, right? And so it's a little bit like if you've got a broken pipe. So you've got a pipe where the water's supposed to go, through the pipe over here, but you've got a broken bit, and so water's gushing out, and this is going over here and maybe causing some problems. It's a bit like just trying to put more water through, and so you get more of it gushing out and more of it gushing out, and again, this can worsen the condition. Not great. Now, if we're working with the Qigong in a way where we're quite conscious and we're being quite gentle, and instead we're focusing on, like, oh, hey, some of it's gushing out over here. Let's maybe direct some of it over here instead, and eventually help that pipe to mend, to be fixed. And so now we've got a harmonious flow again. Fantastic. Qigong can be a great tool for that. But without that level of awareness, without practiced in the wrong way, it can cause harm. It can worsen an existing condition. And part of the nature of psychosis is that the person with psychosis is often not in a good place to judge whether it's having a good effect on them or not, because their viewpoint is distorted. So, having said that, there's these good reasons why Qigong can be harmful to someone with psychosis, but it can also be beneficial at the same time, and it would be wonderful for people to be able to get that benefit, of course. What might some of the cautions around that look like so that they can use it in a safe way? It doesn't have to be anything too wild, because again, for the most part, Qigong is really, really safe. Often what that caution would look like is, one, not just doing undirected, self-guided Qigong practice. This is the most common way that people get into trouble. Anyone gets into trouble with Qigong, where they maybe read something in a book or something like that, and for most people, it'll be fine to just explore that, give that a try, right? The problem for most people is if they get too intensively into it and they and they practice with way too much strong intent, and if they don't do that properly, that can cause problems. For someone with psychosis, just the chance of those problems occurring is higher. It's a lot higher. And so even to sort of casually just explore different things that they might see in a video or in a book, it's not really a good idea, because again, they might not be in a position to really judge well whether it's having a good or a harmful effect on them. And so one of the biggest cautions is to make sure that you work with a teacher to help guide you and to help give you a little bit of external perspective on what you're doing, what you're experiencing, and whether things are progressing in a healthy way for you, and maybe to sometimes give you some caution about, oh, hang on, let's pull back on that practice. Maybe we won't do so much of this for a while. Maybe we'll focus on something else, and to help guide you in that practice. That can avoid most of the possible issues that can occur. A second part to this is, because your Qigong teacher, they may have sufficient knowledge and skill with Qigong to be able to give you some good guidance around that, but it's most likely that they don't have a full set of skills in terms of understanding all of the ins and outs and intricacies of mental health and psychosis and all of the things that can go with it. And so it's also really important for someone who has psychosis, if they're wanting to work with Qigong, get all the benefit from that, to also make sure that they're in regular contact with whoever their medical healthcare provider is, whoever's sort of supervising them and helping them to maintain their condition and improve it. So that means, yes, you're going to have a Qigong teacher who's helping to guide you. That doesn't mean they have to be with you every time you practice. They can give you practices to do, and you can do them by yourself. But someone who you're touching base with and checking in with about your practice just from the learning Qigong and adapting it to your needs. But then also a medical practitioner who is monitoring you from that other side, and who, if you have a serious condition of psychosis, it's likely that you have this anyway, that you have a medical practitioner that you check in with, and it's really important to then actually tell them about your Qigong practice as part of what you check in about, and just and let them know, hey, I'm doing Qigong practice. I'm aware that sometimes this can cause some complications. I feel like it's doing me good. Just want to let you know about it so that you can give me advice if I need it as well. Right. And if you have those people, and look, in some beautiful situations, sometimes they might be the same person. You might have a doctor who is working in the area of mental health, who's also skilled and has knowledge of Qigong, and so that you might be working with both of the same person. Often it might be two different people. It might be someone who's a Qigong teacher who's guiding you, and then someone also checking in from the other side. To make sure that whatever you do, you're doing it in a way that's safe and healthy for you. And then you can get a lot of benefit from that. Again, you can use Qigong as a way to help to regulate yourself better, to help to regulate your energy better, to help to get it to flow more harmoniously, and to help you to become more grounded, more connected to your living experience. Yeah, it can be a beautiful tool for that. You just do need a little bit of extra caution around that. All right, a little bit of a different topic. It is one that comes up from time to time as I'm talking with people, both people just curious about Qigong and often also people who are teaching Qigong, who want to understand a bit more around this. So I hope that that's helpful. I'm sure it will be helpful for at least someone out there, that it'll give you some good perspective on what you're doing within your practice and how you can do that safely and get the most benefit from it. All right, I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.